Thank you all so much for being here. We should keep a running total of how many volunteer huddles we've had. I feel like this is volunteer huddle number 978, perhaps. Um,
Well, I think we started in 2019. Like it was the end of 2019 going into 2020 because of the census and just getting people prepared.
yeah,
But yeah, it's been a long time.
it's been a long time.
And we appreciate your persistence.
Yes, we absolutely do. Well, these are some of the things that we're going to cover tonight. We are going to start off with talking about what's happening nationally with redistricting, and Colin Marazzi from ACLU is going to talk to us about that. We're going to go through some of the things that happened right before the mapping events that we did in Bowling Green, Dayton, and Kent, the People's Brigade that was at the State House. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty of what happened at the hearings of the Ohio Redistricting Commission. And then what you really want to know is a deep dive on our new congressional map, the map that was passed and adopted, and is now our map, until the next census. And then we're going to just look at some kind of behind the scenes questions, some concerns, some, you know, lingering mysteries that, we all know went into this whole process, and talk about that and talk about what's next. So there's a lot to go over. And again, we appreciate you being here. And I'm just going to let Colin get started. Starting right
Yeah,
out with the
yeah. Well, thanks, Mia, and good evening, everybody. So happy to be here with you all again, even if it is under poor circumstances after what we experienced over the last couple weeks. However, I did want to take a moment to kind of zoom out of just Ohio for the current redistricting saga that the country finds itself in. And this is a pretty apt political cartoon that we saw. And it really does kind of sum up the what I would call the narrative of the redistricting battle across the country. As you can see here, we kind of have, the GOP elephant talking with the uh, Democrat donkey. The common mentality at the start of this, when we first heard that Texas was going to be engaging in mid-decade gerrymandering, was that this was going to be a kind of run the table moment for the GOP. And we've seen that fade more and more as the weeks have progressed. Obviously, Election Day was a big day with all things redistricting, and I'll get to some of that here in a little bit. But I just wanted to kind of spotlight this cartoon here. Seems to kind of capture the moment we find ourselves in. Both parties fighting it out tooth and nail across the country, scraping together seats. And I hope everybody here will notice that there's not a caricature or a drawing of a voter in this photo. Left out of this entire conversation, no matter what state you're in, no matter where this is happening, voters are consistently the lost person, the lost cause of this fight. And this is just kind of underscores yet again how toxic gerrymandering is and how it really is the antithesis of representative democracy. So thought you'd get a chuckle out of that, but here, now we'll kick it over to where we are nationally. And this is just a very simple rundown of states. And I'm going to try to sprinkle a little bit of additional knowledge, color in the lines here on some of these states. Obviously, we know here Texas started this whole saga off at the behest of President Trump, where they did a mid-decade gerrymander. The Democrats in the Texas legislature actually fled the state, trying to break quorum so that there would not be a vote. That was never going to be a permanent, a permanent strategy for success. And ultimately, Democratic state House members from Texas returned, and a new gerrymander was in place that was going to add potentially 3 to 5 new Republican seats starting in 2026. I say the word potentially there for one huge reason, and that is if anybody's kind of looked in or listened closely to some of the analysis from last week's election, you will hear that minority groups kind of returned to their historical voting pattern in terms of political preference. It's been well documented that President Trump enjoyed a unique level of success from Hispanic and Black voters in 2024. Exit polling data shows that that was not the case last week. And Texas is in particular very sensitive to that because the gerrymandered map that they passed this past fall really does target the Hispanic and Latino heavy districts along Texas' southern border. So I'm hearing a lot of pundits on the national stage talk about did the Texas GOP actually, cause themselves to actually lose some potential seats in 2026 if Hispanic voting trends return to their historical level. That's something to keep an eye out for as we get closer into 2026. But as you'll see, as we kind of move along here, there's always kind of that, that backlash, even in a pragmatic political sense, that can occur from this type of gerrymandering. In Texas is going to be an interesting test case to see how durable that gerrymander is, again, based off the performance of Hispanic voters. Next, we know Missouri, they redistricted and eliminated the Democratic seat in St. Louis. That leaves Missouri with, I believe, a 7 or 8 to 1 congressional map. California passed Prop 50 this past week by a wide margin. Prop 50 actually outperformed the Kamala Harris margin from 2024. And Prop 50 was really sold as, pardon my French, but a middle finger to President Trump and the Trump administration. I was listening to campaign stops, and it was never really a talk of new districts. This was all being framed as a pushback against the Trump administration. And California has had a very contentious relationship with the Trump administration, not only from the ICE presence in LA, going back even further to the wildfires, where there was a political dust-up over the handling and the management of that natural disaster. So this was California and Governor Gavin Newsom's kind of response and ability to really kind of, quote, take the fight to Donald Trump through Prop 50, and it crushed expectations. We know what happened in Ohio, where they revamped our map, gerrymandered our map further to have a potential 12-3 map starting in 2026. I think the big key is to, obviously watching out for Representative Landsman's and Captor's seat. It'll be interesting to see how those work. North Carolina, they added a congressional seat as well. And then finally on this page, I want to talk briefly about Utah. And Utah actually just recently, I believe it was on Tuesday, there was a court order implementing a map as a result of litigation by the League of Women Voters, as well as a couple other advocacy groups out in Utah, that actually created a Democratic district in the Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City area. What's very heartwarming, I think, about this development is that this map is a direct result of Utah's judicial branch actually serving as a check on the state legislature. Just a bit of backstory, the people of Utah passed back in 2018 Prop 4, which was redistricting reform. The state legislature then came back, absolutely gutted that reform. Plaintiffs sued, and the Utah Supreme Court actually said, no, state legislature. The people of the state of Utah have all of the legislative power. And that is why you are unable to neuter or roll back any citizen-led and citizen-passed measure. And that ultimately was the decision that led to the creation of a new Utah map where there will be one Democratic seat. And it's going to be a safe seat. I believe it was a Harris plus 24, completely encapsulated once again in Salt Lake County. So that's what we have here. We also have some additional states still in the hopper. Florida, I think, is going to be one of the more interesting states to watch, as they have the most seats really to gain for the Republican side, if you're watching. Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, and Nebraska are all contemplating adding or protecting one seat, 1 to 2 seats in their delegations. And then finally, we want to talk about Virginia, where the elections last week, even though there was no direct redistricting question on voters' ballots, the outcome of those elections for governor, for attorney general, for House of Delegates greatly impacts Virginia's ability to gerrymander their map ahead of 2026. So a lot to watch out for in Virginia, as we're going to see their House of Delegates pass another constitutional amendment in accordance with their system for constitutional amendments. It's really going to come in under the wire. And the Virginia governor's race is very important because there might be potential to have to move filing deadlines, and write legislation to actually facilitate this mid-decade gerrymander. And it's really, the maps being floated around are very aggressive. So those are the states that we're actively watching. Oh, Mia, if you could go back one last thing. I just want to state that the, kind of elephant out there still that we're all paying attention to is a case that was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court, Louisiana versus Calais. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. But that case will ultimately decide the future of the Voting Rights Act. Plaintiffs in Louisiana are essentially saying creating minority majority districts is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. As we know, the current Supreme Court is no fan of the Voting Rights Act, specifically Chief Justice John Roberts. However, it still remains to be seen how or if the Supreme Court will handle this case and potentially whittle away the Voting Rights Act further. I have a couple links here that I encourage folks to check out to kind of get the full picture and full backstory. Should that case come down in the worst possible way, to where the Supreme Court basically says the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional, that puts in play over a dozen new states in the South that could potentially do more redistricting, more gerrymandering to wipe out the minority Democrats that are the only Democrats in those southern states. Still a lot to be seen, a lot that could happen, but that is something we are definitely watching. And we hope you do too. All right, Mia, now we can go. And then finally, this is just kind of a chart I found from Kyle Kondik on Twitter. Kyle Kondik, native Ohioan, runs the Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia's Political Science Center. And this kind of just shows how all of this hustle and bustle of redistricting and gerrymandering across the country in a dozen different states, is really kind of leading to a wash in all respects. And this kind of goes back to that political cartoon we showed, to where this is really, it's turning into essentially, like I said, a wash. Both sides are, engaging in this gerrymandering arms race. Voters are having their choices literally taken away from them in real time. And that's across states, red state, blue state. It's happening all over. And you can, I think, see here, when you look at it from a partisan lens, it's really going to be all for naught, because at the end, it really does seem as if this redistricting arms race is going to kind of come to a draw. We'll keep following it, but just a snapshot that, no matter who wins, Democrats, Republicans, voters are losing. That's who's losing in these redistricting battles across the states. And in all of this torturing of our representative democracy is being done to gain 1, 2, 3 seats. And it's just a travesty. So thank you very much. I have to run once I'm done, but I can try to answer any questions if there are any in the chat or in the
We
Q&A.
don't have any in the chat and the Q&A at this point, but we will be sure to note them down if there are any that are specific to the national scene. But thank you so much, Colin. And yes, it is shocking at the expense of the voter. And also, it's this whole thing of breaking norms, and it's so easy to destroy things, but it's so hard to put them back together again. And so, that is really upsetting. All right, so we're gonna plow ahead, and I'm gonna turn it over to Catherine, who's gonna talk about our mapping events.
So one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I know we went through this map making that was not a particularly pleasant process, but I really enjoyed the trips that we took. We went to Bowling Green and we went to Kent and we went to Dayton, just talking about, well, what is it we actually want? What could districts actually look like? And part of it was trying to show like what was possible in terms of transparency, in terms of public input, because that's not what we were getting when it was coming to the map making. And I did include this word cloud. So this was from Bowling Green. People were asked, what is the word that comes to mind when you think about gerrymandering? And there's something kind of magical about all the ways all the words come together, and just think about how unfair and cheating are the biggest, but also there's dirty and unbalanced. And so, with that, since I'm assuming if we're on this call, we all hate gerrymandering, I will lead you through a little bit about what happened with the mappings. So this was wonderful. So Trevor Martin from the League of Women Voters of Ohio, and Andrew Green, who's with the League of Women Voters of Akron. Am I getting that right, Andrew? There we go. Anyway, the two of them did this amazing job. Many of you will know Andrew as a citizen map maker, but it was a wonderful opportunity just to help people think about like, well, what could the maps look like? And I think the thing that's really painful about this process is redistricting is this real opportunity to have a conversation with the people who finalize the maps and with the public about what it is that they want in their representation. And that's not what actually happened. So many of you will know that they did not unveil the maps until the very, very last minute, so October 30th. So Mia, if you will move to the next slide. So Kathy Johnston, who's this wonderful, wonderful organizer, many of you will remember her from the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing. She's retired now, and she said, you know what we should do is we should have signs, and we should say, where's the map? And we could hang out, wherever it is that legislators are, moving between buildings or whatever. And I was like, they can take those maps. They can take your signs and your maps and whatever. They can take those away from us. So why don't we just be walking billboards? And so I wanted to do a great big thank you to the people who decided to be part of the People's Watch. You have a sense here of just the kind of fun that we had. So you have Jen Miller with her binoculars looking for the map. And they basically, folks walked around talking to legislators, talking to lobbyists and aides, asking, well, where's the map? And I think it was really powerful. You'll notice some candy there because, of course, by the time we were getting to the very end of the month, it was the month of October, and we were getting to Halloween. So the People's Watch folks handed out, tricksters, tricksters. This isn't a treat. Show us the map. And so I want to be super clear that we've tried to have a little bit of fun with it. I did want to do a special thank you to Reverend Jed Deering from the Episcopal Church. This is Trinity Episcopal. And so when y'all came for Fair Maps Day, he is the pastor there. He came and did a prayer with us in the rotunda. We also, Deacon Nick Bates, and many of you will know him from the Ohio Hunger Network, also came. And so I was gonna say, we had a lovely poet who came and did a poem about gerrymandering, and I just think it was a real opportunity to be in community and just be like, what the hell, people? Why is it we can't actually have transparent map making? It's in the Ohio Constitution. And
Absolutely.
they shouldn't be able to get away with this. And at minimum, they should know that we are watching them. And with
Absolutely.
that, Mia,
Yes. So, this all happened. Look how impressive we were. Look what a huge percentage of the people in the room we were. We were really filling up the whole room there with our Where's the Map shirts. So, um, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about, what happened at the very end. So we all know that the legislature, the General Assembly, had the first opportunity to draw a map, and they did not do anything or draw a map by September 30th, which was their shot. And then the next shot was at the Ohio Redistricting Commission, and they had from October 1st to October 31st to draw a map. But they didn't actually convene at all until October 21st, which was just to swear them in. And then we weren't even sure if they were going to bother to meet at all. We was getting later and later. We were wandering around the State House in our Where's the Map shirts. And then at the very, very last minute possible, two public hearings are required to pass and adopt a map. And we got down to the very last 2 days of October, the 30th and the 31st, and that is when they held their hearing. And so at the first hearing, the map had not even been uploaded yet. It was not possible for us to weigh in on the map because we hadn't seen it. And even when we arrived, it wasn't even uploaded yet to the website. And then when it was uploaded, it was just a picture and some data. It wasn't in Dave, so we couldn't actually analyze it. And then the next day, on the 31st, amazingly enough, lots of people submitted testimony, but they were not interested in the testimony. There were no questions. There was no follow-up. ACLU presented very compelling testimony. League of Women Voters presented compelling testimony. Common Cause Ohio, compelling testimony. Citizens of Ohio, compelling testimony. Nothing. We were restricted to 3 minutes each for our testimony. No questions, no follow-up, essentially not even a pretense of being interested in the content of our criticisms, either of the process or of the map itself. So it was really very, very disturbing. And, we showed up. 180 written or oral testimonies were submitted for those two hearing days. That's a lot with basically no notice. And there was this cartoon pretty much sums it up. There was a lot of very justified anger in the room. There was a lot of frustration. There was frustration at the process or the absence of the process. There was a frustration that they weren't following the law. They weren't following the Constitution. And there was frustration at Republicans. There was frustration at Democrats. And, it all happened very, very quickly at the end. We are going to go into the details of the map. And then we're also going to go into some questions about, what happened behind the scenes and all of that. But just to acknowledge, we've been working on this for many years, you all along with us. And the very, very abrupt ending and kind of shocking ending was disturbing and upsetting. And so, we're right there with you with our righteous indignation and our anger at this situation. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trevor and Andrew, who are going to get
before you go
into.
to Trevor and Andrew,
Okay.
one of the things I wanted to highlight is one, Trevor testified and he
Yes.
was like an auctioneer going through the maps. It was like the fastest thing I'd ever heard.
Yes.
So Trevor, you should take a bow for that because trying to
Yes.
get your testimony in 3 minutes, that was something. And then the
Yes.
other thing I wanted to highlight is I have never been thrown out of a hearing room at the end so that you couldn't actually listen to the basically the press gaggle. Usually you can kind of listen a little bit and you can stay in the room, but we were escorted out fairly harshly.
Yes.
And then they left, that we were allowed to stay in the corridor, but they had, three state troopers watching us, which was bizarre. How's that?
Yeah.
We
Well,
come in peace. We just want fair maps. It was a very bizarre thing.
they find our insistence on them following the law very threatening and
Mhm.
very scary. And all we want is fairness. We're not
Yes.
even, we're just wanting fairness for all Ohio voters.
Yeah, I
With
was gonna
that,
say one of the sergeant at arms kind of pushed Tommy Rad. I mean, it was not good.
Yeah.
was crazy.
It was not good.
All right, here we go. Trevor and Andrew.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. I will say my wife took a look at my testimony and she's always telling me I mumble and I speak like to not loudly enough. She's like, "Who is that?" But thank you, appreciate that. And I want to also give credit to Andrew. Not only is Andrew Green a map maker. But Andrew has a fantastic eye for data, obviously, and can has a great ability to present that data, but also a knack for telling stories with numbers and data. And not only that, he's he's a reporter now. Andrew got the scoop on the map. Andrew's the one who first gave us some kind of depiction of a map that we could look through on Dave's and analyze. Like Andrew broke that map. So everyone out there, he's also he's breaking scoops. He's got the scoops. Um, but here we are. This is our new map. And we're looking on face value, you're looking at baseline over the last 10 years. It looks like a 12-3 map. There's some things to be said about that, but we're looking at 12 seats that are +5, at least +5 Republican, 2 seats that are more +5 or more blue, and then you have only one seat in there that's in between. And that's 13. And so you saw Marcy Kaptur and District 9 and District 1, Landsman, both of their districts got more red, while D13, Representative Sykes got saw a little bit bluer. Districts 3 and 11 were left unchanged. But there's like a large thing about when we're looking at proportional representation is like the efficiency gap. And on the old map, there was an efficiency gap of R plus 13, which means Republicans waste 13 less percentage points than Democrats. This map is now R plus 20. And so you have a larger wasted votes for Democrats. And so oh, and I'm sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if when
Oh,
you were talking about efficiency gap, if you wanted me to show
oh,
that next slide.
I did want to say, no, I'll leave that for later. Yeah, we'll go ahead and move to that next slide. Thank you. So you'll see here that, I mean, when you look at Dave's redistricting, pretty much every metric that we use to measure maps, it got worse. I mean, proportionality went from 28 to 13. All right. and I want to point that like 13 is so so low. It's like you could make 1,000 maps, and you know 85 is like the median for a proportionality map. If you make 1,000 maps, you'll see like 85 as a median, and here you have 13. All right, and competitiveness went down. Compactness uh went down, splitting. Um, and there were, there was an additional split over in Mahoning County that they needed to introduce because of the way they uh, drew District 13. There was some other like concerning municipality splits. They've got Mansfield cut all all up. They've got Worcester um, almost cut in half. Austin Town, and we'll get to some of these splits when we go into more detail. But just all in all, just not good regardless of how it may or could have gone. It would for party. It wasn't good for people. It wasn't good for voters. And if you take a look at some of these other scores for maps, for example, the Citizens Redistricting Commission, the Unity map, and then you have the Democratic introduced map, SB 259, HB 442 there, much higher across the board. So we can go ahead and get to the next. So like the impact on not only voters but candidates. Almost immediately we saw Kevin Coughlin up in District 13 drops out of the race. Not worth the money and time to challenge Amelia Sykes again in a district that you know he lost last time around in a district that was more beneficial. Michael Kripchek is running for Congress in District 6. And this is, there's large parts of District 6 were affected. Michael Rulli's district, is now split. What was District 6 is now 5 different districts. You have District 6, and then you have some of that went to District 14, some of that went to District 13, some of that went to District 12, some of that went to District 2. Um, you know, this guy's spent how much time traveling that district, trying to campaign, spending money. Very confusing for candidates, time consuming, waste of money, and also confusing for voters. And then down, uh, our our friend and fellow fair mapper Linda Sheard lives in Athens County, and she shared a lot of this with us. There's a native Jared Christian was campaigning, and he all the way down to Athens County. Now Athens County is now gone from District 2 to District, I'm sorry, from District 12 to District 2. And so, and Athens County has gotten hell over decades. It's been back and forth, back and forth. They never know who their congressional. They're always changing. Every time a new map is drawn, Athens, gets the short end of the stick. This is a map here where it shows the changes. District 3 and 11 were the only districts that remain unchanged. But then there's all these other, some of these, really significant, like I said, District 6, and, you'll look up there to the northeast, or I'm sorry, northwest, District 5 and 9. And we'll get into this, but, a lot of changes. And I did want say one other thing. In the links that that we'll all share with you, Andrew also did a map that shows, like, within Dave's, that shows in detail where each of these sections like switched over to another district. You could zoom in to neighborhoods, and it tells you, like, what district they were in, what district they are in now. Super helpful. Like I said, Andrew does a fantastic job at presenting this data and helping us navigate that. And so we'll go into and I'll let Andrew, pop this off. This is some more fantastic work that he put together, just, showing some of the changes. And so I'll hand it over to you there, Andrew.
Thanks, Trevor. So this is the kind of thing that I would have liked to have shared with the commission if we had the time to look at their map before they voted on it for any length of time. But just looking at District 9 here, kind of like Trevor was showing, we can see the area that was unchanged, see the area that was removed, see the area that was added. So in District 9, we removed about 80,000 people who voted Trump plus 26 last year, and we replaced them with the same number of people, but they voted Trump plus 59. So you're actually getting almost 20,000, 15 to 20,000 more Trump voters in that district to shift the overall district margin from one that Trump won by almost 7 points and Marcy Kaptur won by just under 1 point, to a district that Donald Trump won by 10.5 points. And had it been in place last year, Marcy Kaptur very likely would have lost by a handful of points. Moving on to Congressional District 1.
Can we go back to that? Can we go back for one moment? We were up there in Bowling Green, during one of our mappings, and none of this was what anyone had proposed. Any of the citizens, any of their suggestions and feedback that we got up there. This is pretty much the opposite of what we wanted, of what the Northwest folks who attended our mapping wanted. They wanted to keep Wood County whole. They wanted to keep that with Lucas County. They wanted that paired with Sandusky and Ottawa and Erie, kind of keep those northwestern firelands together. And we produced a fantastic map that came down damn near to the individual, and this was not it. And when we're talking about impact to candidates as well, there is rumor that Macaulay will be running against Kaptur, and his home county of Henry was added to District 9, and so it's possibly that Rob Macaulay will throw his hat into the ring, and then you'll have Josh Williams as well, and then possibly Derek Marin again. We'll see. So a lot going on up in there in District 9 next election. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
So District 1, same kind of look here, looking at what was removed from District 1, what didn't change, and what was added. So in this case, it's a little more stark, the difference between what was removed and what was added. We had Harris plus 11 or 12 points was taken out, almost 100,000 people. Add in about 100,000 people that voted Trump plus 53. And if we go to the next slide, we'll look at kind of how they did that. So there's two county subdivisions that are split between Districts 1 and 8 in Hamilton County. And mathematically, we only need to split one of them. But the redistricting commission, in my assessment, saw an opportunity to pull more Democratic voters out of competitive District 1 and replace them with more Republican voters. So they had to make a second split in Indian Hill on the east side there to pull out Fairfax, Marymount, Columbia Township. And by doing that, they were able to pull out an extra 8,600 voters that voted Harris plus 17, and they replaced them with voters in Greene County who voted Trump plus 42. If we were to undo that double split and only split Greene Township, we would take what is currently now a Trump plus 2.6 district and turn it into a Trump plus 1.8 district. So we introduced an extra split, which is the opposite of what we were promised in 2018. And we did that for very clear partisan gain, which is also what we were told we were getting rid of in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, Congressional District 13. So this is the one that Trevor mentioned. Amelia Sykes currently represents. Republican Kevin Coughlin was going to challenge her. And when the new district came out, he decided he wasn't going to run anymore. So this district was one that former Vice President Harris won by only a couple hundred votes. Now it's one that she would have won by several thousand votes. And they did that by taking parts of Stark and Portage County that voted Trump by 31 points and replaced it with Kent and Streetsboro and Portage County that voted Trump plus about 8 or 9 points, or excuse me, Harris by 8 or 9 points. So all in all, that shifts the district a little over 3 points more to the left, and Kevin Coughlin, who lost by, I think, about 3 points last year, saw that extra 3 points as something that he wouldn't be able to overcome, and he decided not to run again.
And I was just going to point out, so sorry, so, you know, the district got slightly more competitive and he decided it wasn't worth it. He was going to drop out. And yet the toss-up districts for Landsman and Captor are being still characterized as toss-up, even though they're much more, I mean, what they would have to overcome to win is much greater than what he would have to overcome in order to win this. So,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. And one thing to note with this change here too is that this change is what forced the commission to introduce an extra county split. So with 15 districts, we have to have 14 county splits. You can see kind of that southwest corner of Portage County was in the old District 13. They got rid of that, but they still kept part of Portage County, a larger part. And that forced the neighboring District 14 to take on part of Mahoning County, introducing another county split without getting rid of one that already existed. So now instead of having the necessary 14, we have one extra at 15 county splits, partially because of the decision that was made here.
All right. And we were up there at Kent on our last stop during our Mapping roadshow tour. And you know, they had released, you know, they had voted on the map earlier that day. And so unfortunately we weren't able to kind of produce a map that citizens had proposed. Instead, Andrew and I kind of introduced the new map and you know, the impact on their community. But we did get feedback from folks there, and again, we had more than 50 people, I believe, at each of these events. And you know, I had a questionnaire that we passed out that folks turned in, and you know, so we did get a lot of feedback from folks in these communities. And you know, even though you know there's a lot of folks in the Kent community that were, you know, preferable to a district that paired them with Summit County, but there are, you know, there's still a lot of things that would have been that they would have changed. You know, there's a lot of dismay about, the Kent, Talmadge, Brimfield area kind of being split. Uniontown down there, and Northern Stark is split. So there are still some, a lot of things that if they would actually, listen to people who live in the district, actual constituents and voters that are affected, then, maybe this would have been, more, you it's just, again, this was a backroom deal, as we've been saying, and the people had no part of it, and so this is not the product that would have came out of an open, transparent process.
I mean, and I think that, what fair districts and partners, equal districts and We Are Ohio, et cetera, showed that it's not that hard to do this right. Just go there, have a hearing here, show people what's going on, ask for their input, and you're going to get better maps. I think that's what is really upsetting about how the commission didn't listen to Trevor's testimony, didn't listen to anybody's testimony, is they don't actually understand that public deliberation ends up with better maps that serve the people better. And so it's not only, illegal and insulting, it's just stupid, and very frustrating. All right, one more map here.
So this
This is
one
my
is
district.
this one's District 15. There's a lot going on here, and it's kind of hard to decipher, and that's kind of the message of District 15, in my opinion. It was
Yeah.
a mess before. It's even more of a mess now. So instead of linking what remains of Franklin County after you draw District 3 to Miami and Shelby County, it's just Miami County. And instead of using Northern Clark County to connect them, we're using Southern Clark County. And like what we did or what we saw in District 1, where there's two county subdivisions split unnecessarily, same case here. And that's part of that narrow strip along Southern Clark County that connects Miami County to the rest of District 15. And just mathematically not needed to split both of those communities. And I did an analysis where, what if we would have, made that split of Clark County a lot more compact and a little more logical, and did some shifting around with Miami County? What could we have done? And I came up with a much more compact district. I don't have it in this slide deck, but I did post it online. Much more compact District 15, and it would also have been much more competitive. So instead of taking a Trump +9 district to a Trump +10 district, as they did with District 15, it would have taken it to a Trump +6 district. So it would have been more competitive, but that's not what they did.
Well, I don't understand where they've got this stretching all the way out to Miami anyway. Mike Carey lives in Columbus. So, what's he doing representing, like Piqua out there in Miami County? I have no idea why they're so stuck on this. And I said this in testimony, like, the District 15, it's got its nose down here in the downtown of Columbus. It contains our state house, the warehouse district, the arena district, and it's like Columbus, and like, I don't, what are we doing way out there? I don't understand. And then again, you look at the folks of, as you mentioned, Andrew, like Clark County, really didn't come out of this. I mean, man, they were already kind of messed up, but now it's, you've got Springfield taken out of District 10, and you've got, Middleton now added. But then in doing so in that District 10, you've also got like the city of Monroe split over there in Butler. But I mean, Clark County, like they've got the Springfield and suburbs of Springfield all over the place, and I don't understand. Uh, I just don't get it. Yeah, it's so peculiar and odd. And when we were discussing this in the mapping, it's just like 15 was already such a odd shaped district, and it's like how could it get weirder? And it's like, well, they did it. It's
Yeah,
I don't understand.
yep. Ay, ay, ay. Um, all right. Well, I'm going to go on if that's okay. If folks have questions for Andrew or Trevor, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. Of course, we're going to send you these slides. We're going to send you this recording. And so you'll be able to see all those things. So I wanted to just go through a few. I know that, everybody knows that there were backroom negotiations. Everybody knows the Republicans were bound and determined to give Trump a few more districts. We all know it wasn't a fair process. It wasn't a constitutional process, but there's lots of different kind of questions and things sort of swirling around in the background. So I just wanted to both bring some things up, but also make a statement about like where we stand as fair districts. And so for fair districts, for us, for the coalition, for, the people that are in this coalition, the organizations, no matter what the outcome, we care about the process and about there being a fair and legal process. And the process was not okay. So for us, the bottom line is we want lawmakers to follow the law, full stop. And they didn't. And that's not okay with us. But having said that, it's fair to just ask some of these questions that we know are swirling around and that people might have. So one of them is, did the Democrats betray us, or did they cleverly come out on top? And there are different articles, and you'll get these links that are in here. There are different articles that kind of say, actually the map that they ended up with is clearly better than the one that the Republicans offered them. We do know that they were, quote, threatened with a worse map. And so totally not excusing their behavior in any way, and I've stated our position, but just to let you know, and they, we've said a better map comes when there's public deliberation, and there was nothing at all to excuse anything happening in private, any secret negotiations, any backroom deals, but they were kind of trying to look at what might happen if they just said no, they weren't going to participate in the process. What would we have ended up with? So one consideration is, would even having a worse rigged map have been worth it? Is it worth it just to be able to say, we're not participating in an illegal process? This is an illegal map. We're not part of it. You lose a lot when you agree to a map and it becomes a bipartisan map. Even if you feel like you've gained a couple of districts that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise, you lose a lot because you become part of the rigged process. And, that is definitely something to consider. But what was it that they had to hold over the Republicans that were threatening them? Well, what they had was the possibility of a referendum. So I think you guys remember that if the map passed in that period of time in October, that was from the Ohio Redistricting Commission, it would not be subject to a referendum. But if it went, if they didn't pass a map and it went back to the legislature and that passed as a regular bill, we could collect signatures to try to overturn that map. But those signatures would have to be collected 90 days after the bill was signed into law in the middle of winter. And of course, Yoast could have delayed the certification of the summary that, was on the petitions, and so could have cut into those 90 days. Who knows? There's also another issue that I want to bring up, which is, I don't know if you remember that last year, in the special session, the majority passed a bill that said that only US citizens could contribute when it came to ballot initiatives. And what that means is that any organization that is contributing money towards a ballot initiative has to have a way of verifying that any money that's come in comes from a US citizen. So even if somebody gives $10 and their husband is a green card holder, that money is not allowed. So there'd have to be access to the email lists, the membership lists of all the organizations. So it really dampened the ability of citizens, not politicians, to work with outside groups and to collect money from outside groups, even if they were all US citizens. It was difficult to verify that, and it just basically had a kind of chilling effect on organizations being willing to support the ballot initiative. So that's something that, Democrats, when they were thinking, could we do a referendum? Couldn't we do a referendum? Well, we'd have a hard time getting money from outside because of this issue. So that is something that, probably was going through their minds. Another thing that might have been going through the minds was our Ohio Supreme Court. Our Ohio Supreme Court is not the court that struck down the gerrymandered maps in 2021, 2022, 2023, I don't remember. I guess they were all in 22. It's a different map. It's a different court, and it's a court that is on record as really supporting these gerrymandered maps and voting for the Republicans supporting what's going on in the state house in most instances. And so even though if we did a referendum and we got it on the ballot, the general thought was, well, we'd have to use the old map in November. We'd have to use the old map because the new one is being referendumed. It wasn't 100% sure that the Ohio Supreme Court would go along with that. So there was a lot of, and people have asked questions about the court in the chat. And, the court is not a friendly court to fair maps. It's not a friendly court to the constitutional process. And so that is something that definitely, was had to be taken into consideration. So, and then of course, backroom deals, incumbents, Macaulay, wanting a district, some people wanting to say that, Trump had approved this or hadn't approved this. I have a link here to the Rooster, who I'm sure many of you know is a political blogger who focuses on the Ohio State House. And he has lots of, kind of dirt on the backroom stuff that went on with Macaulay, with the Democrats, with the Republicans, with Trump, with this and that. And, it's nasty. It's nasty thinking about all the things that went on. But clearly, we do not agree that all of these things should have been happening in private. There should be accountability. We want to see the sausage getting made. The sausage, it matters for democracy that we be able to see the process. That's what we really care about. So I recommend that you read some of these articles and, kind of look at some of this backroom stuff that was going on. But keep in mind that accountability and transparency is, really the name of the game and what we really want. And with that, I know everybody wants to know what's happening next, and I'm going to turn that over to Catherine.
So like everything, we need to be thinking about, well, what are the attacks on direct democracy? So I'm talking about, all right, everybody, let's get our clipboards. But we know that they sometimes change the rules to make things harder. And there is a bill, Senate Bill 153. It is still in committee in the Senate, so it has not passed the Senate. We're on version 8 of this legislation. The thing to know about this is it would make it more complicated to collect signatures. And one of the simple things to think about is, you know how like when you collect and you're collecting signatures and somebody is not registered to vote, you basically get them registered to vote, you fill out the registration form or you help them do it online. In this case, the signature would only count if the person was actually already registered. In other words, you'd have to get them registered and then come back to them a few days later, these folks that you, for example, found at a parade. Well, it's not going to happen and will decrease the ability to get signatures. And then there are some other things in this bill that are really problematic. So we're going to send a follow-up in an email. And one of the things I'm going to highly urge all of us to do, yes, there are things in Senate Bill 153 that are about voting, and there are things about direct democracy. And we do have a fight on our hands to push back on anything that makes it harder for us to exercise this right to collect signatures and take our amendment directly to the ballot. All right, so many of you, I don't know about, like, I see this is Mike Ahern here. He's got his clipboard and saying we'll be back. One of the things I loved was going to the hearing on Halloween and people holding their clipboards and clearly highlighting that they were ready to go back. Now, y'all know it takes time and energy and money and lots of planning. We've got to figure out what we're going to do about the ballot board. So it's a it's a long-term strategy. So it's going to take us some time, but one of the things that we can do in the meantime, and I think it's incredibly important, is one, do all we can to like educate people. Right now this is a wonderful opportunity to get people all over the country thinking about redistricting and thinking about the power of gerrymandering, this weird thing where you can draw voting districts and disenfranchise people. It is, we're in a wonderful teachable moment, and this is a great time for us to develop a national coalition for redistricting reform. I just think, that effort, like at the end of the day, when we started this conversation, we started with all of the national fight and how what happens in one state, then the other state's like, I'm going to do this, and all this partisan bickering and fighting and battling, and the voters are left out of it. So we do need a national solution. So yes, we should be getting ready to ensure that we can collect signatures, to ensure that we can protect direct democracy, and then focusing on, well, how can we get together with other other voters all across the country to demand that we all have fair voting districts. So that's really what's next.
And keep talking to your friends and, say that we're going to do an initiative in the future, and will they join you and will they fight for fair districts? Because I know there's a lot of desire to do that. All right, I think we are at Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth actually headed out, but I did
Okay.
want to highlight. So there are so many really good and interesting stories that are out there about what happened in Ohio. I highly encourage you to check out the New York Times. Mike Ahern, we just saw his picture, was quoted in the New York Times article. There's just some really wonderful, wonderful pieces. I was going to say, I particularly like the Signal article, where it really dove into like, what do the maps actually look like? What does this actually mean? And just encourage you to check this stuff out, share it with friends and neighbors, share on social media. It's just incredibly interesting. This one is just to highlight that the Secretary of State actually today added this thing where you can actually look up your new congressional district and you can actually look and see how it's changed. I'm in that 15th congressional district. It's not good news, but it's good to be able to actually see it. The bit.ly, all the congressional maps, these are all the maps that were submitted from citizens across Ohio, including Andrew Green. I don't know if Trevor did a map. Certainly, that's a place where you can actually look at all of the different stats. If you're interested in taking a deep dive on the Cone Q, you can actually go and look at the map on Dave's redistricting app. And then if you have
Awesome.
questions or whatever, just send an email to us. We're willing to help you kind of navigate Dave's because it takes a little bit of work. And the next
And
slide,
I was
Mia.
just, oh yes, sorry. Go ahead, Catherine.
Oh, I just wanted to highlight upcoming events. One is already started since that's Medicaid in the school, but in case it was something that interested you, you can just go from this to that. We have an upcoming Ohio Voter Rights Coalition meeting. That's on Friday. And like I said with Senate Bill 153, the voting work and the direct democracy are in the same legislation. So I would encourage you, if you're available at noon on Friday, please join us. There's an interesting event in Athens. We'll send you a follow-up email. Let's talk taxes, and then coffee with Common Cause.
Awesome. And then I just wanted to say we are not going to have a huddle in December. We've been having these monthly huddles for 6 years now. And all during that time, there's been stuff going on with the maps, and we're at a little bit of a junction here. But so we are going to skip December, and we might skip January as well. We'll see what happens, but we'll send you the link to, I mean, it's the same link. If you registered for tonight, then it's the same link. It pops onto your calendar. But we may end up going to, an every other month or quarterly or something like that. But we will definitely let you know, because there will still be a lot going on with redistricting. And we want to make sure that you guys are always up to date with everything. So that is it for now. We will send a follow-up. We appreciate everything that you guys do, and we appreciate you being here with us. And we soldier on, and we'll be back.